Hi, friends. Welcome back. So, we've been on kind of a journey over the last few episodes, and today we are reaching the culmination of this particular series on family engagement and children and play and personal motivation and kind of bringing all of that together. If you've been hanging out with me over these last few episodes, you know that we've been building towards a shift in how we think about our visitors, what they want and what they need. Back in episodes 21 and 22, we unpacked this idea that families aren't walking through our doors simply to consume our content. In fact, most families are experience seekers and they are looking for opportunities to share together and to create meaningful family memories together at your institution. As Dr. Falk's research shows us, grown-ups are frequently driven by a need to demonstrate their excellence as parents or caregivers. And one of the ways they feel that they can accomplish this is by facilitating family museum visits. So we see that the decision makers of family groups, that's the person who ultimately says, yes, this is what we're doing, which is almost always the adults, often overlap in their motivations between social meaning making and group facilitation. They use our museums to positively fulfill and excel in their role as caregivers. They want communal learning where the entire group is activated, not simply a setup where one person is checked out and the other person is engaged. So over the last few episodes, we have talked about the importance of making grown-ups feel like the hero of the visit by providing scaffolding like simple scripts and conversation starters and multi-user text connections to make it easy for all ages to engage without feeling ill-equipped. And we talked about the importance of intentional design to offer information without struggle, reducing both physical and cognitive friction in the museum space by creating multi-sided and multi-user activities. But today, we're bringing all of that together by exploring how we can apply game theory and game mechanics to our programs, not to detract from the important learning that's taking place, but actually as part of a rigorous pedagogy. If you have ever led a field trip on a tough subject, waited on a school bus that was 20 minutes late, or bounced straight from a toddler storytime program into an impromptu meeting with a board member, you're in the right place. I'm Rachel, a museum education researcher, consultant, and creative partner for small but mighty education teams who feel a little stretched thin, but know this job is worth it. This podcast is where museum education scholarship meets real-world realities, helping you reclaim your creativity, energy, and maybe even your lunch break. Welcome to the Modern Museum Education Podcast. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the show. If we haven't met, I'm Rachel, the founder of Modern Museum Education. I am a creative consultant for museum educators like you, helping you to create sustainable, strategic, and pedagogically sound programs for children and families in ways that won't have you burning the candle at both ends. Now, since the progressive era, museum educators have embraced their ethical obligation to meet visitors right where they are, using any tool in their toolbox to engage and inspire. So much research shows that today's audiences are looking for transformative, authentic experiences. But the research also shows us that the attention span of the public is shorter than ever before. Now, while there have been some contradictory studies on this phenomenon that is colloquially called TikTok brain, which basically is a way to refer to extremely short attention spans, TikTok brain may or may not be empirically supported, but we can all agree that holding on to people's attention can sometimes feel like trying to catch the wind, right? So, what is an educator to do, right? When our time is short, our resources are limited, and our audiences are begging for quality programs that circumvent their constant distraction. Oh, and also, by the way, they have placed a lot of emotional weight on this experience as part of their family meaning making time, right? It's a lot of pressure on a museum moment. And one of the ways that we can accomplish all of these various goals is gamification. In our field, we talk a lot about engagement, right? I use that word all of the time. And I'm fearful that it has become a buzzword. And that makes me sad because it is such a perfect word to describe what we do in our museums every single day. Like one participant in a workshop I did a few months ago observed, engagement, he said, is a two-way street. And I loved that description. We, the educators and the audience together co-create experiences. We give information, they give attention. And their attention is predicated on, it is founded on the degree to which they have bought in to the experience. You know the phrase, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And the same is true for engagement. Now, as I discussed in the last several episodes, a person's buy-in to participate or engage depends on how deeply or not their personal motivation stretches. I could have the coolest exhibit in the world, but if the visitor can't see what's in it for them, they won't be fully engaged. Enter play and games, or more specifically, game-based learning, which is sometimes referred to as GBL. Research on game-based learning is extensive. Much of it is centered on learning in formal environments like classrooms, but it shows that this tool, game-based learning, is exactly what we need to bypass a person's hesitation and pique their interest enough to essentially hook them, right? And before they know it, they're engaged. And that means that they are learning. Win-win, right? Except sometimes in our institutions, we resist the idea of play. Especially for certain professionals, they feel like it creates a culture clash. And this tension is not new. It is not a recent phenomenon. This tension actually goes all the way back to the literal inception of museum education in America. On one side, you had museums curated serious authority in matters of important heritage and content. And on the other side, you have the chaotic, unpredictable nature of people. And this is something, like I said, it goes all the way back to the progressive era and to the beginnings of what we now call museum education. Now, to bring it back to what we're specifically talking about, this specific instance of play, this is further complicated because the unpredictable people that we are talking about are children. And if you remember from episode 22, when we think about these things, as we often do from an adult-centric viewpoint, we are ignoring the lived experiences of children. And this is something, of course, you are probably familiar with in the world of museums. We talk a lot about honoring the lived experiences of people. And yet, we find ourselves so frequently not honoring the lived experiences of children. And like I mentioned in an earlier episode, the critical analysis of this is called childism. And I'll link some more resources in the show notes if you're interested in diving a little deeper into that. Now, if you are one of the museum friends who work in a children's museum, you might be thinking, what is all the fuss about, right? Children play in our institution all the time. Yes, they do. And do you know why we even have children's museums? That's right. It was the progressive movement. John Dewey was a champion of child-centric education, and John Cotton Dana and Anna Billings Gallup were champions of visitor-centric museums. But one of the consequences of these developments was that now there were special museums for children. There were kid-friendly museum spaces. And if you designate one space as kid-friendly, that implies there are other spaces that are not. And this is where the rest of us who don't work in museums with giant slides right in the gallery find ourselves. But fear not, because we are museum educators, all of us. And as scholar Lisa Roberts notes, our work is about negotiating this mismatch between the museum's culture and the visitor's culture in a way that respects both. And as it happens, despite its reputation, gamification can actually help us accomplish this. Using game theories won't distract from the importance of your collection. These strategies are the exact pedagogical architecture that honors both the intellectual entry points of the visitor, children or adults, and also your site's education-focused mission. Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? If you feel like you want to incorporate more gamified activities into your programs, your first step is to diagnose your actual need, because we aren't playing games just for the fun of it. We aren't a game store, we are a museum, and therefore everything we do, fun included, must point visitors towards the learning goals that we have for them. Again, whether or not they actually accept that learning and participate in it is up to them. But we can and should do everything we can to grease the wheel for them. We need to remove as much friction in the learning process as we possibly can. And play helps us do that. So the framework that I'm sharing for incorporating gamified activities into your programs comes from this book, which is called the Allure of Play. And it was written by two college professors who are game theory experts. And I will put a link to this book in the show notes so that you can find it for yourself, because I'm just touching on just the teeny tiniest tip of the iceberg of what they go into in much more detail. So I would highly recommend this book. I will say that this book was written with the audience of classroom teachers in mind, but there's a lot that we in the informal education space can glean from it. So it's a great, great resource. I will also add that if you or your staff feel like you want some more support in applying these tips and ideas that I'm sharing today, or you want to go a little deeper into actually developing gamified programs in your museum, we can do that together in guided workshops. My frontline focus workshops are here for you, and we can turn together all of this academic theory into real world, hands in the, glue sticks practice. You can find out more about my workshops and all of the things that I have to offer at the links in the show notes. So in this book, The Allure of Play by Bisz and Victoria Mondelli, they walk you through step by step the whole process of adding game mechanics to your lessons. I'm just going to share with you the very first two steps here because I feel like they are the most applicable to museum educators who are looking to add gamified elements to existing programs. So their book is called The Allure of Play because their framework is called ALLURE, and it is an acronym, as all great frameworks are. The A and the first L are the ones that we're going to talk about today. The A stands for ask. Where are our visitors getting stuck? Where are they losing interest or completely falling out of the narrative arc? Once you recognize where along the learning journey your visitors are losing momentum, that is where you want to focus your game mechanic activities, because that's where they need to be hooked back in and reignited in their own engagement. So once you've identified these gaps, then you want to move on to L, which is for listing. Listing all of the ways that you can imagine filling those gaps for your visitors. So instead of sitting in your staff room brainstorming generic craft activities just to keep people's hands busy, these busy work coloring sheets that sometimes we give out to little kids. Instead, we need to list the precise cognitive actions that we want visitors to perform. So here's where you're going to go back into the recesses of your memory to your college Psych 101 class, and you're going to pull action verbs straight from Bloom's taxonomy. Verbs like analyze, compare, investigate, appraise. These are the kinds of words that tell you what you want visitors to be doing. Like, what is it that you want them to do? Write those actual words down. And then you're going to map activity elements, i.e. game mechanics, directly to those learning action verbs. If you cannot match an activity element to a learning action verb, you don't have good pedagogy. You just have good vibes. It's just going to be fun for the sake of being fun. Now, I will say in some cases, there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of the time in the museum world, what we're really looking for is fun that's associated with our learning goals. We want to blend those two things together. And this is how you do it. You link game elements or activity elements with your learning goals consciously and intentionally. So at this point, you might be wondering, okay, well, what are these game mechanics? What are these activity elements? Is this where the game happens? Is this where we put a game into our program? And the answer is yes and no. This might be a good time to remember that there are as many ways to play games in museums as there are museums. There is a fascinating 2024 study out of Australia that attempted to categorize the types of games that museums employ. And they were able in their study to identify 5 broad types of museum games. Their fourth category, it's the one that is, I think, the most important to most museum educators, especially those of us in small institutions. Their fourth type is called playful non-game. And this is an interactive, engaging experience that utilizes game mechanics, but doesn't necessarily meet the formal definition of a quote unquote game. So this is where we're using game mechanics to accomplish learning goals, but we aren't actually playing what could be called a game in any other sense. And that one is the one I really want us to focus on. Because here's the particularly interesting bit, especially if you find yourself in an institution where playing games is frowned upon. The authors of this study state, this is a quote from their study, games cannot be neatly sorted into mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive frameworks. The boundary between game and not game remains complex and contested. And this, for me, this is why I tend to push back on people when they say certain subjects are not appropriate for gameplay. What I would say is that certain types of gameplay are certainly not appropriate for all subjects. But in my opinion, all subjects, and I do mean all subjects, can benefit from the inclusion of intentionally and consciously chosen game mechanics, because game mechanics is just another way to say engagement principles. These are the tiny little hooks that we use to hook attention and pique interest and convince people that our information is worth their time and attention. When you combine all of these little game mechanics together, you get something that looks more like what we would call a game. But these elements alone really look a whole lot like Keller's ARCS model of learner motivation. We talked about that in an earlier episode. As a reminder, this ARCS model stands for attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. And you're going to see as we go through the 5 types of game mechanics that they enable us to accomplish attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. So the point here is that game mechanics equal engagement principles, and you can mix and match them to whatever gamified extent you want it to be. You can make it as lighthearted or as serious as you want, as you need to for the topic at hand. But these engagement principles are what help motivate personal buy-in so that learning can actually take place. Okay, without any further ado, here are the 5 R's. Simple game mechanics or engagement principles, if you prefer, according to Bisz and Mondelli. Okay, number 1 is random. Number 2 is rapid. Number 3 is rival. Number 4 is reward. And number 5 is role. So let me go through them briefly. But again, if you would like to have someone help you incorporate these principles into your programs, check out the show notes for links on how I can help you do that. Or if you prefer the DIY approach, you can find the link to Bisz and Mondelli's book in the show notes as well. Oh, and don't forget, you can also sign up for the Engagement Lab, my free Telegram community, where members can ask me questions directly about these types of topics. Okay, So, number one, random. Here's where we utilize mechanics of chance and encourage autonomous choice. You might consider offering opportunities for visitors to solve problems in a nonlinear fashion or explore a free exploration, like let them decide where they want to go and in what order they want to experience things. You could also use the random element in an activity to position the learner against something that is unknown. So you could have them turn over a card. You could have them roll dice. We can inject mechanics of chance and nonlinear choices into programming in order for visitors to feel kind of empowered to shape their own trajectory of learning. They can kind of take the reins of the learning experience. This links back to that confidence piece in the ARC's framework of motivation. Okay, number two. Rapid. Rapid involves limited time and rapid streams of information. It forces simplification of details. Now, that might cause some pearl clutching amongst us. But remember that most museum visitors have motivations that are either instead of or in addition to a particular intellectual interest in the topic. So what that means is they might not want to know everything that you know about the topic at hand. And that's okay. We are not supposed to be giving them dissertations on everything about the topic at hand. The point of what we do in museum education is to give them just enough to make them curious so they want to continue on that learning journey. We don't want to overwhelm them with information. Just because you breeze through a topic in one area doesn't mean you can't revisit it elsewhere. Rapid is more about varying the pace to keep the experience fresh and offer moments of mental respite for visitors who might be feeling some measure of museum fatigue. Because museum fatigue is real, even for those of us who love museums. We get tired in museums, and visitors get tired in museums too. And using a rapid pace or varying the pace at which we give them information allows their brains to kind of take a little break. Okay, number three, rival. Now, rival does not mean competition. It can mean competition in games, but in our case, as a learning engagement principle, rival means we are introducing models of growth. Think we want them to be their own rival. Their future self is a rival against their current self, who is a rival against their past self. Are they learning? Are they progressing? We want to give visitors tasks and objectives that are achievable so they can progress down this avenue through this journey. This is what rival means, positioning themselves against themselves. Now, there is a caveat here. These tasks and objectives have to be achievable, but they also need to be challenging. So if it's too easy, it's not engaging. If it's too hard, it's not engaging, right? There's a happy medium. We want to find the Goldilocks version between too hard and too easy. Number four is reward. Now, reward does not necessarily mean a sticker at the end for good behavior, although it can mean that. Reward is feedback. Feedback should be desired, but it should not be high stakes, meaning if a participant does not achieve the reward, they don't feel bad about themselves. But it is something that you want them to want. It's like the carrot that you're dangling out there that they want to go to. That's reward. This feedback should be both extrinsic, meaning it's external to the person. It's feedback or acknowledgement of their effort. And it also has to be intrinsic. It has to be personally meaningful. This is where the satisfaction part of the ARC's model comes into play. You can accomplish these types of feedback rewards through inquiry-based conversation. You might say, "Oh, what an interesting perspective," or "That is a great question." One of my favorite ways to talk with visitors in a museum is to challenge, right? To rival them and say, can can you ask me a question that I've never been asked before? Right? So we're positioning, there's a rival position there, but also there's a reward, because if they can come up with a question that I have never been asked before, then I'm going to say, huh, you did it. I have never been asked that question before. And then they feel great about themselves, right? But this is a low stakes reward. If they can't come up with a question, they don't necessarily feel bad about it, but they're in usually intrigued enough to try. And that's what we want. One of the most obvious ways to think about this idea of feedback and reward loops inside of a gallery are and you've been to a museum where you've seen lift the flap, right? Where you pick up a board and you see an answer underneath, or you turn a wheel or something like that inside of a gallery exhibit. Those are perfect reward examples, because if you guess right, you were right. And if you guessed wrong, that's okay. There was not a lot of stake. It wasn't a high stakes thing, but you have been hooked enough to try so that you can get this positive feedback. But maybe you don't have those kinds of activities inside of your gallery space. Maybe you work for a small museum or a historic house museum. You can still accomplish the same exact thing. You can add these sort of find the answer activities with laminated sheets on an O-ring. You can do some kind of matching card activity. You can even write words on popsicle sticks and put them in a jar. Like anything that allows a person to find an answer and compare what they thought with the actual right answer gives them this feedback reward. And also, again, this is the rival element at the same time. Do you see what I mean? These are gamified principles. These are game mechanics that don't sound like games, and they don't necessarily even have to look like lighthearted play. You can absolutely use these kinds of gamified elements, these game mechanics, these learning principles that are inspired with game theory when you're talking about difficult subjects. Okay. And lastly, number 5, role. Do not let the name fool you. We are not only talking about role play here, although in certain cases that might be appropriate and you can use it. However, role play in museums is amongst the types of play that is the most contentious and the most iffy, depending on the topic you're talking about and the age group. Now, if you're talking about little preschoolers and you're at a train museum, sure, let them put the conductor hat on. That's not a problematic way to do role play. If you are in a space that interprets like genocide or, slavery, traditional role play is not the kind of game mechanic that you need to be looking at. But role play goes beyond that kind of imaginative identity borrowing activity. Okay. Role play is when you give a visitor something to identify with, and it does not have to be a person. It can be a theme. It can be an emotion. It can be a narrative, right? It could be an archetype of a person or a character. But again, that's where you need to be the most cautious. But this game mechanic, even if you're using it to sort of help them identify with an emotion or a narrative arc, this mechanic, more than any of the others, inspires empathy. This is how we help visitors understand the context of the content and to feel personally connected to the story. Now, this is just the beginning of where you can go with these different principles. When you start to link up all of the simple game mechanics, you come up with complex game mechanics, and complex game mechanics lead to much deeper learning opportunities. But that is a topic for another day. As I wrap up this episode, I want to summarize it a bit for you because I know I crammed a lot of information into this. If you want to add games or play to your programs, but you feel uncertain, remember, empirical studies on the effectiveness of play and games on learning in the museum space, particularly in relation to perpetuating stereotypes and trauma, is scant and it is contradictory. So this is my most important advice. When in doubt, proceed with caution. Align lighthearted elements with lighthearted subjects. But also remember that you can extract the principles of game mechanics and apply them without the lighthearted feelings of a game and apply it to any subject at all. And also remember, there is more than one type of museum game. You can do a non-game where you are utilizing these game mechanics in ways that align with the ARCS model of learner motivation, right? Gaining attention, demonstrating relevance, providing opportunities to develop confidence and satisfaction. And all of those things is really just like play in a trench coat. Again, play and engagement are the same thing. They're just like different sides of the same coin. Now, if you want to apply some game mechanics, this is how you do it. Number one, determine your need for the play. Where are your learning bottlenecks? Where do your visitors get stuck? Next, determine why you need the play. What is it that you want them to learn? And how can the game mechanics accomplish that goal? List out all of those thinking steps that your visitors will do to demonstrate their learning. Use action verbs here and link those action verbs and the game mechanics together in your activity. And that is how you get visitors to move themselves along the learning journey inside your institution. If you would like to hear me break down how these game mechanics work in a game that I once developed about Civil War diseases, come join me inside the Engagement Lab. It's my free Telegram community where I'm dropping exclusive voice notes, where I'm translating all of this dense academic knowledge into real world examples. You can bring your own current family programming straight to that monthly Q&A thread, and we can untangle it together. So thanks again for being here today. And until next time, keep the research close and the craft glue closer. Bye. Thanks for being here today. If this episode helped you, please subscribe, forward to a friend, leave a review, send me an email. It's all great ways to help other museum educators find the show and help me know how best to serve you. As always, you can find the show notes, the resources, and all the ways to work with me at modernmuseumeducation.com. I'll see you back here next time. And remember, your work isn't childish just because you work with children.